And thank you all for coming today to the first ever Reasonable Adjustments training. I'm glad to see you consider the issue, the subject, so important to come on a lovely day like this and take the time during your summer to be here. Reasonable adjustments is, of course, a very important subject. It's an issue which, for many centres, it's been troublesome. There's been issues that have arisen. And it's also an area which, as far as OCNI are concerned, has changed somewhat in terms of what's expected from centres, and that's a recent thing. If you feel you're here today proficient at reasonable adjustments, you may have some unlearning to do. So just to warn you, there are certain things which are different, have changed. So we'll be addressing that. I'll be highlighting those things anyway to make it quite clear where we are. Just to introduce myself a bit more, my name is Jonathan Lana. I am an external verifier here. Some of you would have met me already. I see some familiar faces around the room. So that's my role within OCN, and I suppose my approach to this session today will probably be what I would expect to see from a centre. If I'm coming to visit you for an external verification visit, I will be expecting to see paperwork, evidence of what you've done, some systems in place. And so that's the angle I'm looking at. So I want you to be in a position today when you go home to be sure you're confident enough to have everything ready for me to come and see you. With Angela here today as well, who's also an external verifier. Maybe Angela will stand up there. There's Angela. So if you hear us come in, you make sure your reasonable adjustments are in place, your paperwork's in place and everything's in order. Okay, so we'll make a start. The purpose of reasonable adjustments. What are reasonable adjustments and why apply reasonable adjustments? Well, reasonable adjustments, as the name suggests, are adjustments we make to a situation to allow things to proceed. We've obviously made a reasonable adjustment this morning with the time, because we were supposed to start 9:30, and it's a bit later than that. Although I can assure you we will be finished by 1 because the signers are going home, so we'll definitely be done by then. But we make reasonable adjustments all the time. But reasonable adjustments, as far as we're concerned today, are defined as an action to reduce the effect of a disability or difficulty that would otherwise place a learner at a substantial disadvantage in the assessment situation. So a reasonable adjustment is something we're going to do to overcome what could be perceived as a difficulty or an obstacle that would hinder the learner from accessing assessment, accessing their learning. Reasonable adjustments are made to assessments to enable learners to demonstrate their knowledge, skill and understanding of the levels of attainment required by the specification. So we need to be able to accommodate our learners to the greatest degree possible. Of course, there may be limits to that, and the special word we have here, of course, is reasonable. What is reasonable? And we'll look at what is reasonable at the end of the session, or end of the workshop today. Okay, I want to draw attention as well to the distinction of reasonable adjustments against special considerations. Reasonable adjustments and special considerations are addressed within the same policy, they're within the same area. We're particularly considering reasonable adjustments today. Just to be clear then, special considerations are applied post-assessment. If we consider a learner has been disadvantaged during assessment, after that assessment. Reasonable adjustments are things we apply before so that during the assessment they're accommodated. That's a key difference between the two. So other than that, recording of them and the quality processes, they're consistent with reasonable adjustments, but special considerations are applied post-assessment. They may result in adjustments to the outcome for the learner. So we may find the learner's been disadvantaged during the assessment, something not a thing we could have anticipated. And that's a key thing. If we can anticipate a disadvantage to a learner, we need to apply reasonable adjustment. We need to find that. It's not, special considerations aren't the excuse. They're not the back door out of doing reasonable adjustments. So they are something very different. Just to be clear about that. So today it's reasonable adjustments we're dealing with. Okay, so why apply reasonable adjustments? Well, you have some reasons here for their application. The purpose of them: to maximise access to learning and assessment, ensure quality is not compromised, to justify extra support, to ensure transparent application of support, to allow scrutiny by quality assurance processes, and to allow regulation by the awarding body. So first of all, the key point, as we mentioned, is to maximise the access to learning. This is very important to OCNI. It's a key part of the ethos of OCNI, and I hope it's a very key important part of your centre's ethic as well. We want to enable learners to reach their full potential. We want learners to be able to take part in whatever you're providing for them. We don't want to be turning people away. This is consistent with our Access to Fair Assessment statement, which your centre will have. You'll have this statement on your file as a policy adopted by your centre. In order to apply that policy, you need to be able to apply reasonable adjustments. It will also be congruent with your disability discrimination policy. Reasonable adjustments aren't just for people with disability. There can be other issues as well which we may want to accommodate. But you will have a policy addressing disability discrimination, and in order to apply that fairly, you will need to be applying reasonable adjustments. Okay, we want to ensure that quality is not compromised. Adjustments we make may present a risk to the quality of your assessment. When you make an adjustment, you're going to be changing something, changing the conditions that surround assessment, surround the presentation of information to the learner, to elicit information as assessment around their evidence they generate. And so there's an inherent risk in this, that quality is going to be compromised. And as you know, quality is very, very important. If you ever speak to Simon Hamilton, you'll know that very clearly. Quality is ultra important. And we want you as centres to produce high quality assessment. We want quality to be the number one on your list. So quality has to be at the top. So in order to maintain quality in your assessment and in your procedures, and to accommodate people who may need adjustments, reasonable adjustments is a process to allow that. It's a balance between learning and learning access and quality. And so for that reason, we need to be very much on the ball with this. Okay, if we're going to apply a reasonable adjustment, we need to be able to justify what we're doing. And reasonable adjustments as a process allows us to do that. If we were just to apply an adjustment willy-nilly, just to say, well, this person might need this, so we'll do that, we're of course risking quality. But we're risking the consistency in our processes as well. We need to be able to justify what we do clearly. There needs to be an evidence base to what we do. And so this process ensures that adjustments have proper justifications. If there's no justification, evident justification for a reasonable adjustment, then it's not reasonable, because you're actually unfairly advantaging your learner above the other learners in your class, in your cohort. So we must ensure that reasonable adjustments are fully justified. Adjustment needs to be transparent. That is another feature of the process. Transparency. We have documentation which will record what we do. We need to keep good records of reasonable adjustments, and we'll look later on at the pro forma and the requirements that are required for recording them. This allows transparency. Transparency through your centre so that we can ensure consistency of approach and for standardisation purposes. So transparency is an important thing. We mentioned quality already. Quality assurance within your centre will need to take into consideration the application of reasonable adjustments. Documenting the documented process for applying reasonable adjustments allows your quality assurance to function. Reasonable adjustments otherwise could undermine your quality, as mentioned, so IV sampling, the internal verification process should always sample any reasonable adjustments that you make. Now we'll talk maybe in more detail about mention sampling later on, but the IV process needs to address reasonable adjustments. And if you make a reasonable adjustment, it's the internal verifier's responsibility to apply that and to be on the ball with that. But that learner must be sampled as a part of your internal verification, your moderation of that group. And the internal verification then should ensure that the application of reasonable adjustments is consistent and appropriate, looking at any impacts on quality. It should ensure the coherence of your application of reasonable adjustments. Finally, the process of reasonable adjustments will allow the scrutiny on regulation by OCN&I, and that is done by external verifier. And as mentioned, I am one of those, so that'll be what I'll be doing, looking to regulate and view what you've done in terms of reasonable adjustments. This is an issue which regulators are concerned about. They're concerned that they're applied, they're concerned that they're applied properly, that quality is not compromised. Therefore, OCN&I are concerned likewise that they're done properly, and so through external verification, your application of reasonable adjustments will be looked at. So that's another reason to have a process in place, to have good records maintained. It's your responsibility to ensure that you're compliant with what OCN&I want.